All right, and welcome back to the Paisan Sports podcast presented by Elevation 5 to Iggy Sports. Dante DeBlasio joined as always by Zach Deal of What's the Deal Sports. So I've got to ask, what's the deal with all these Patriots fans wanting AJ Brown? They say they need a receiver. Oh, let's get AJ Brown. I was like, oh, we're getting AJ Brown. We can't wait to get AJ Brown. You can't have him. Why do you think you can get AJ Brown? Just because the Patriots want AJ Brown doesn't mean you're gonna get him. We're not trading him. He's staying here, not over there. And what is the deal with Tyrese Maxey? 2 games in a row? 5 points? What's going on?
Yeah, this comes after. First, I'll talk about your Tyrese Maxey thing. This comes after you. What was the tier you were trying to? You were trying to say that he was closer to Damian Lillard.
What?
I threw out there Lou Williams, but I wasn't saying.
Oh yeah,
Kept
I
saying
don't
that
like
he
the
was
Lou
better.
Will comparison. Yeah.
I kept saying he was better than Lou Williams, but you were trying to say he was closer to Damian Lillard, which is crazy. I love Tyrese Maxey. I'm very happy for him, but some of his game is flawed. And the one thing about him, like he's a really good offensive player, but he at times can get very inconsistent. But he keeps the same aggressiveness, so sometimes it turns out a little bit ugly. But I mean, the Sixers are just completely ugly in general. They don't really have any footing. Quentin Grimes is turning up, though. We're going to talk about the Sixers in a little bit. I'll cap it at that for now, just so we can go on to your other meatball of the week and talk about that because that's interesting. Because I actually responded on social media to this today. And I'll start off by saying I'm actually trying to repost the podcast now, so I was preoccupied on Facebook. But a couple hours ago, DraftKings. So FanDuel and DraftKings have like social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram where they have just like the DraftKings, not Sportsbook, but DraftKings itself's account and FanDuel, and they'll like post content. But it's like real. I don't even know how I would like describe the content. It's kind of just like it's all clickbait type, like attention grabbing, like this guy for that guy, or what could like just all type of stuff like that. So DraftKings threw out this hypothetical trade. They were talking about it all day on the radio. Like you would have thought that AJ Brown. They were talking all last week about Myles Garrett, like coming to the Eagles instead of like guys that could, they talked about the in-house guys that could be leaving and what could happen with them. But it's just all about guys from outside the organization, and they spent a lot of time on the radio talking about it today. So I kind of thought it was isolated to the radio stations in Philadelphia itself, and people just kind of, bringing it back to life, like how last year where AJ had to call in the offseason to the afternoon show with Jack Fritz and Ike Reese and explain himself and kind of be a little bit aggressive in that. But people are talking on the New England sports radio that it's like a possibility and that they're hearing things. And this hypothetical trade that was put out onto the DraftKings Facebook account that I saw, it wasn't posted on any other of the social media platforms that I saw, but I saw it on Facebook and I had to respond. And I've actually been getting a lot of responses back to it. And Patriots aggressively trying to upgrade their wide receiver room. What if via Matt Barry, NBC Sports? And then it's a hypothetical trade between the Eagles receiving the 38th overall pick, which is a second rounder, and the third round pick from 2026 for AJ Brown, 2 picks. So this is my response real quickly. This is my response. I think I nailed it in the least amount of characters that you can nail it. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Eagles, exclamation point. On the Eagles end, exclamation point, obviously sarcastic. Let's trade the guy who has helped the team reach 2 Super Bowls, win 1 in 3 years for less than we got him for after he became a better player in Philadelphia than he was in Tennessee and is entering his athletic prime. Let's get right to it, Howie, with another sarcastic
I
statement to
just
end it.
it's
You're muted right now. I can't hear you.
oh, I accidentally muted my
There
mic.
you
Can you
go.
hear me now?
Sometimes I accidentally do that myself.
The reason I made that my what's the deal segment is like what like it's really starting to annoy me how it's like do people not realize when it comes to the world of trades that both parties have to be interested in the trade? It's like the Patriots were like, oh, we want to go out and get AJ Brown. The Eagles have made no, they have not. The Eagles have shown zero interest on the other side of that
I
in
mean, it
wanting
says
to trade
it
AJ
comes
Brown,
down to
and yet all the fans are like clamoring, like they're acting as if trading for AJ Brown is a real possibility. And I'm like hearing it from them like constantly, and it's like, what is wrong with you?
well, I
Like
think the
that's
issue
like if
also
that's like if all the Sixers fans started saying, we wanted to trade for LeBron James. Does that mean it's going to become a possibility? No, you can trade. You can want to trade for him all you want. That doesn't mean it can happen. Like, shut up. You're not getting AJ Brown. It would make zero sense for us to trade him. Even if you gave us like 5 first-round picks, it wouldn't make any freaking sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the issue lies with real quickly. LeBron's still the best player in the league, and it's not even close right now. He's absolutely balling his
Yeah.
brain out right now.
Yeah.
He's just the best player in the league, and it's not even close. But talking football, I think the issue actually lies with Mike Vrabel himself, and Mike Vrabel is actually hyping up this topic, and that's the issue. And I think that's where
It is a
all of
big
this
part of the
has been
issue, but
created
like if
from.
you're a member of the Patriots fan base with a brain at all, like you should think, okay, yeah, Mike Vrabel really wants to trade for AJ Brown, but I can't see the Eagles doing that.
Well,
That's
you
how a
also have to think.
rational fan would think.
You have
That's
to
how a
think like
rational fan would think. But
what
the, but
the
they think this is a
exposure that people
real
actually
possibility.
the exposure that people get is probably the only 2 or 3 times that they heard AJ Brown talk all season was probably the comments after the Panthers game that he made about the passing game, and not the different types of comments and how he's just, like being like local to the Philadelphia media and seeing him on a daily basis and seeing interactions with him on a daily basis like the Philadelphia fans do. I feel like people outside the organization, even though the Eagles are one of the most popular franchises at the moment and arguably the best team in the league right now and just moving forward, I still feel like people aren't exposed exactly to that. They saw what Saquon was able to do. They saw Saquon just get paid, which even makes I think AJ Brown is even more expendable. They see the Devontae Smith contract on the books. They know they can't pay everybody, but they just don't understand that. I mean, the Eagles gave AJ Brown a contract extension along with Devontae Smith this past offseason just to make him happy and to get him back into the top annual earnings of highest paid wide receivers in the entire NFL. So, and I think that was with the hindsight of knowing that CeeDee Lamb was going to sign a big contract to keep him happy, to keep him relevant amongst wide receiver contracts in the NFC East and along with the entire NFL. So, I mean, it's nothing to even trip about because the Eagles know where they stand with A.J. Brown. First of all, that trade's never going to get it done. There's nothing that the Eagles aren't pressing for any needs. It's not like, oh, hey, let's go get some resources from an A.J. Brown trade and then go all spend it on a Myles Garrett trade, and we'll do that. I mean, A.J. Brown, like I said, is entering his athletic prime. So this just doesn't make any sense at all. But I will say I'm also a victim of seeing a guy had played for this coach before or has ties to this guy, or it was his college coach. I kind of make those connections myself. I have a couple free agents that I like for the Eagles that kind of fit that billing as well. A linebacker that I'm going to mention on Twitter, and I might mention later on when we talk about the Eagles that could be on their radar as well. I was actually making the tweet about this guy, the linebacker that I'm talking about, that had connections to a certain coach in Philadelphia while the Zach Bond news got dropped today. So I just completely saved it as a draft and had to move on real quickly because I had to attend to that. But yeah, I don't, this AJ Brown stuff's all just a smoke screen. I mean, if it came down to like getting like a pass rusher, like if we get offered 3 first-round picks, I think any player could be could be made available for the Eagles besides like Jalen Carter and Jalen Hurts. But I just don't see that likely. I mean, for the Patriots, we've seen teams go from really bad to making things happen real quickly, especially when they get good skill position players like that. But I just don't think that's the route I mean, we're talking about the Patriots. I made a tweet this past week about them with another old Mike Vrabel player that they could trade for in Harold Landry, the Titans' star pass rusher that is available on the market right now. The Patriots had 28 sacks as a team in 17 games in 2024, the least amount of sacks in the entire league. Do you think they're going to, I mean, I know their offense is struggling. They have one of the worst wide receiver skill position groups, but I mean, they need a lot of help in a lot of different areas. And I think a lot of their high resources will go into the pass rushing department or the offensive line, the trenches on either side of the ball. And then they'll try and, maybe go get a Devontae Adams where they don't have to give up draft
I
resources.
did see on Twitter that the Seahawks could potentially be trading DK Metcalf.
Yeah, he
So
requested a
hopefully
trade. They
with
also,
that, they will hyper focus their attention onto DK Metcalf and shut up about AJ Brown. Go after a wide receiver that's actually made available instead of trying to snatch AJ Brown from us. Stop being so goddamn annoying.
yeah, and like DK Metcalf, I mean, you can make the AJ Brown's a better wide receiver than DK Metcalf, but if you're looking at like the measurables on paper, like you could justify making a trade for DK Metcalf more worth it than a trade for AJ Brown. And like I said, I think it's a lot easier
Yeah,
to make a trade
it'll
for.
cost you less. I mean, if they want to
It's still
actually
going to
trade
cost your
for AJ
premium. Like
Brown,
DK
they would have
Metcalf,
to give up a lot.
like DK Metcalf, I don't know. I think DK is close to AJ Brown's value. You got to think like if Tyreek Hill became available, he might still be able to generate like a back end first round pick, but that would even be that maybe like a second. Like those older veteran guys that are like still top in the league at their position, but like a young like 27-year-old 6'3" absolute physical specimen in DK Metcalf, he's gonna go for a top 40 pick at the minimum, and most likely a first round pick. So. Yeah, the Seahawks also cut ties with Tyler Lockett today, so he was like one of the most underrated players of his generation at his wide receiver position. So they're gonna need to retool at wide receiver. I mean, it's kind of weird, honestly, that the Seahawks made DK Metcalf available. Like they're a young team. I mean, if they just reset their quarterback position, they're not old. I mean, Kenneth Walker's young. They've got a young offensive line that they've been investing into since they didn't invest into it at all during the Russell Wilson era. And they have some good young defensive players with Byron Murphy, first round pick last year, and Devin Witherspoon, fifth overall pick. And they got Jackson Smith and Jigba. So I don't understand why they would be trying to.
It was DK Metcalf. I wanted to check on this, but yeah, DK Metcalf requested a trade, so that's why.
Yeah,
Uh,
that was also like coming. I mean, somebody that's probably going to be in on the sweepstakes is the Raiders, who his former coach Pete
I
Carroll
hope the
is coaching
Patriots
over.
get him. I hope the Patriots get him, just so they'll shut up about AJ Brown. But anyway,
Yeah,
let's
I
not get
real
caught up in
quickly,
this for
last
too
thing, I
long.
just like if any of those guys come available, send them to the worst possible team. But that's also just doesn't make sense for the player who's trying to get trade. Like if he requests a trade, he wants to go to a winning situation, which
Yeah.
isn't Seattle and isn't the Patriots. So
Well, you know why? I mean, another
unless he
year.
loves Drake
Drake
May,
May
unless
in his
yeah.
second year with a DK Metcalf. I don't know. Maybe the Patriots can start winning some games. But let's move on from this because we did want to, talk Sixers. More importantly, not Tyrese Maxey I brought up originally, but the huge news we've gotten that Joel Embiid is now out for the season.
Yeah, and if you remember last podcast, we had a couple things that I said on there that ended up coming to fruition. One just came out of the blue, which we'll talk about later with a certain contract extension that was given out. But the last thing that I ended last podcast with was my prediction being that Joel Embiid would be shut down for the season, and that ended up happening. So, but I mean, I think anybody
I mean,
could have put
that
that
was
aside.
very
Yeah.
predictable, but yeah.
Yeah, it was, that's an assumption that a lot of people, even not tied to the sports world, could probably make. But yeah, Joel Embiid shut down for the season. I'm going to run through some stats. I read this article. It's an ESPN article. I don't know exactly who it was from, but there was some good stats in there. So over the past 4 seasons when Joel Embiid has played, the Sixers were 158-66. So, I mean, that shows how good they're almost at like a 2/3 winning percentage, over a 2/3 winning percentage, right around there. And then 39 games that Joel played last season, this just shows how vastly different last season was when they didn't have that third star, when they got rid of Harden at the beginning of the season and went through with Joel compared to this abysmal season that we're going through right now. Last season, the Sixers were 31-8 in 39 games that Joel Embiid played.
Damn.
The last 6 games that Joel Embiid played this year, the Sixers were a -61 when he was on the court. -61 when he was on the court, which is just insane. And another insane stat, teams shot 61% inside 5 feet with Joel Embiid as the primary defender this year. They shot 51% last season when he was the primary defender within 5 feet. So, I mean, it just shows the numbers just were completely dropping off. Joel even said it himself, unsparked and unprompted, during an ESPN nationally televised game. It came out as a report that he thought that he needed surgery, which actually bombarded and caught the Sixers off guard. And I'm actually getting a Sam Amico report about Joel live right now. Joel Embiid was angry details of team meeting in which 76ers players called him out, leaked to public. That was already known. So I guess he's just relaying. That was the Tyrese Maxey calling him out situation. So, but yeah, this entire situation was just a mess. Like I said, Joel kind of like took matters into his own hands. The team thought he wasn't going to struggle, and they had the right game plan in place to manage this injury. And they said that he wasn't going to play back-to-back games at the beginning of the season, and they ended up getting fined when he revealed those comments because it was it was against the protocol that the NBA has for injury management and load management of stars. So it just seems like the two sides were never on the same page. Also, there's so many reports of so many different orthopedic doctors, and it said that if you're like a renowned orthopedic doctor anywhere in the country right now, you've probably seen imaging of Joel Embiid's knees. That's how crazy it is, to the point where like literally any type of opinion that could be seeked was seeked by every single possible outlet. So it just seems like it was never getting better. He tore his meniscus twice in the same knee. It's just been an absolute mess. And they were talking about the surgery that we talked about last week of breaking the hip bone and realigning it. And, you know, it's just, I don't even know where to go from this point. And the craziest part about all this is the Sixers, I think, lost 16 of 17 games while Joel Embiid like wasn't playing for most of the stretch of that time. And during that time period, a couple weeks ago, Daryl Morey doubled down and said that he was completely committed to building the entire team around Joel Embiid and will continue to do that. So, I mean, it is just an absolute disaster right now.
I mean, the other thing that they mentioned since announcing Embiid is out for the season, because that did not happen long after our last podcast. Like this news came out quite a bit ago. But what they mentioned more recently than that, is the possibility that Embiid's career is finished, and that they could like apply for
Seek
some sort
medical
of.
retirement. They would have to wait one exact year from the game that he played. But for him, like if he feels good, he say whatever he does in the offseason. I mean, this past offseason, he played in the Olympics and there wasn't every flaring up. That was also another thing, like in this article that was very detailed, is like some days he's completely fine and he's doing all this random stuff and he's in like a long, there's pictures of him working out, doing handstands at practice, which is never something that I recommend and just crazy, but that just adds to the lore of the story. But like, you see him like working out, he's, covered in sweat, he's doing this, at the other. And then they say like a random day, Hulk could just come back and his knee will just be completely blown up out of nowhere for no reason. So,
Well, I saw the surgery he's to get. Like, there's two options for it. I forget what the first option is, but one of the options is like dislocating his hip and then relocating it. The surgery he has to get, and I forget what the other option is, but it's also an insane option. Like, I mean, the stuff we're talking about here, like, I mean, I would not be surprised if this is it for Joel Embiid. Like, this does not sound like an injury he can just like get a routine surgery for and then heal up and he'll be good to go next year. Like, this sounds serious, man. I don't know.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to worry about. This
The
time,
Embiid era could very well be over in Philly, and I just want
I
to
think that's extremely
elaborate when
realistic
I
to bring
say
up and
that
talk
is
about.
this doesn't mean I'm predicting that the Embiid era is over in Philly. I'm just saying it's a possibility.
But
I don't
one
know if
thing about it too
it's
is like
not or not, but it's definitely a possibility.
I know a lot of people that don't pay too much attention to the Sixers that just love having a voice of just hating on Joel Embiid just because it's just a popular thing to do in Philadelphia sports. It's like built into the culture of Philadelphia sports. And they don't understand that this dude has actually tried to play through all this.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason why I
Absolutely.
appreciate him as a diehard Sixers fan, and I'll never give up on the
They
team.
get mad at him because he's constantly hurt, but, like, it's not like he can really control that, and he's tried his absolute best to fight through every single injury and lay it all out on the court.
I mean, and also, like, 2 of the instances, like, breaking his face twice, like, the same facial bone
Those
twice
were
is just crazy.
anomalies,
Like,
dude.
around the playoff time, like, it's just and then one of them
He's
is
got
by
some bad
Montel Fultz
luck, man.
himself,
He's
like,
got
it's
some
just like
bad luck.
yeah, and, like, also being that big, just what can you but at the end of the day, they also had a protection plan in place, the Sixers did, with signing back Andre Drummond, who's just been a complete disappointment this year, who's
You know
been
who's been
banged
a
up the entire year.
disappointment? You know who's been a disappointment is Paul George.
Well, I mean,
Um,
that's yeah, obviously Paul George is,
yeah,
but
that's an
Drummond
obvious one, but that does want to bring me to actually something I forgot I wanted to talk about. So I don't know if you saw, I'm not even sure if I sent it to you, but I'm not sure if you saw Fox Sports release their top 10 athletes in Philadelphia list. Did you see this?
yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, so 1 through 3, I agree with. Okay, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, Bryce Harper. Then number 4, they have Embiid. Me personally, with him not being on the court this year, I wouldn't have him as high as 4 at this moment in time. Number 5, I agree with AJ Brown. Number 6, I agree with Tyrese Maxey. Number 7, Devontae Smith. And then number 8, Jalen Carter. I love Devontae Smith. He's great. I would not put him ahead of Jalen Carter. I would not put him ahead of Lane Johnson. I would not put him ahead of Jordan Mailata.
Oh, I think
Um,
he's absolutely ahead of Jordan Mailata, but
I don't
I
think
don't
he's
think
ahead of
he's
Mailata. He's great. I
think
don't think
he
he's ahead of
absolutely is.
Mailata.
And I think
Um,
he's a better player than
and then,
Jordan
but then
Mailata.
here's the thing: number 9, Paul George. Why? Paul George should not be in the top 10
I
athletes
mean,
in
if we're gonna go down the Paul
Philadelphia.
George, like, rabbit hole, I kinda didn't even wanna mention Paul George in the I mean, everybody knows he's
But
taken a
I
break.
want to mention it just because what is
I mean,
this list?
you have to at the
What
end of
is
it. No,
this list?
I thought we were gonna be able to get a podcast away because that's just such a I mean, that's a whole 'nother,
I
like,
mean,
hours
I,
worth
I
of
mean,
podcast of
Lane
itself, but
Johnson, Jordan Mailata, Quinyon Mitchell, Kyle Schwarber, Zach Wheeler. These are just guys off the top of my head I would put ahead of Paul George. I would put Kelly Oubre ahead of Paul George, for God's sakes. Quentin Grimes, a guy we should actually
alright,
talk
well, now
about.
you're getting absolutely carried away with yourself, but
What
the thing about Paul
as of
George
right
was
now, Quentin Grimes ahead of Paul George, and then number 10 is Trey Turner, which, like, I mean, I would put other people ahead of Trey Turner, but it's not as absurd as Paul George at 9. My God, what an awful list, Fox Sports.
yeah, well, I mean, what else do you expect? That's why I didn't write that down as a topic just because that's kinda some fanboy type content, but, the protection plays, like, with like the thing that makes me mad about Drummond is, like, what, he had played 25 minutes the other day, or it was, like, 30 minutes, and he had 25 points and 18 rebounds, and he coulda
Yeah,
just
where the
been
hell did that come from?
he's capable of doing that. He was just hurt the entire season, and on top of that, they had to run Yabusele at center, playing him out of position when he was already playing really good in the role that he was playing. And then they just didn't have a natural center. Adeem Bona is just not ready to just be thrust
I
into a
forgot he
random
existed.
starting center role. So I think like the plan that the Sixers had in place when they signed Joel Embiid to that contract extension, they also thought they would have the protection of Andre Drummond being able to make up for some of the missed time with Joel Embiid. I don't think they thought Joel would get to this point, but I think that they thought they were going to get a lot more out of Andre Drummond, and it just hasn't worked out that way. So, but a new guy has emerged, Quentin Grimes. So Quentin
Mhm.
Grimes, 44 points,
Hooping. He hooping.
44 points versus the Warriors. That was absolutely crazy, and if you watch the highlight tape from that, that was
I
an
thought that
absolute
I caught
mixtape.
most of the second half of that game. I was
He had the
watching.
ball on a string. Did you catch Steph's, first dunk in 6 years live?
I did not see that. I was gonna say I was watching Elimination Chamber, and then when that ended, I switched over to the Sixers game. I think it was like midway through the third at that point. So that's how much of the Sixers game I caught.
Yeah, so Quentin Grimes drops 44. Steph Curry dunked for the first time in 6 years, probably the last time in 6 years as well. Quentin Grimes, though, like if you watch the actual mixtape, I mean, he's just like the ball was on a string and he was just out there getting buckets, mid range, 3 pointers, getting to the rack, everything that you like. He was somebody that went to Kansas in college, switched schools, ended up at Kansas, was on the Knicks, kind of just got forgotten about. And then we ended up signing a guy in Caleb Martin this offseason, 8 years or 8 years, 4 years, 32 million, 8 years or 8 million per year, excuse me. And he didn't work out. We're not going to be a championship team or contender or a playoff team, really, to be honest, at all. So ship him out, get a young guy, and now he's turning into something. And he's even like,
Yeah,
taking the reins off
Quentin
of
Grimes, he's only 24 years old
yeah, he's young. I
compared to the
mean,
29-year-old Caleb Martin. So this is a guy, you can be a part of the semi rebuild. um, and he can be effective for this team for quite a few years if he sticks around. He's turning 25 in May, but still much younger than Caleb Martin, and he ever since coming here, he's shown a lot of upside, and even in although it's a small sample size, he's showing the most point production he's ever shown in his career. Currently averaging 17.7 a night on 52% shooting from the floor, 38% from three, averaging 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.2 steals per game in 32 minutes per game. I mean, his previous best in points was 11 points per game on the Knicks.
yeah, it's
On
pretty crazy
42%
too. That's another guy that
shooting.
the Mavs ended up moving on from, and they just lost Kyrie Irving for the entire season to a torn ACL. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just like it's literally like a sick
Yeah, they
joke.
lost
The
Kyrie
Mavs.
Irving, Luka Doncic, Quentin Grimes, and isn't AD also hurt?
Yeah, he got hurt. AD went ballistic in the first game that he had. He like went crazy in the first game. I think he had like 30 and 20 or something, and then got hurt in the third quarter and hasn't played since with a groin injury. So they also said there's a possibility that he's out for the rest of the season, and they're a play-in team right now. So they got like Spencer Dinwiddie, Max Christie, who's been balling that they got from the Lakers in that trade, but they ended up losing Quentin Grimes, who could be balling for them now. So
Yeah,
but
I
Max
mean,
Christie's a
and
pretty
and,
decent
and the other
player,
thing
but
about Quentin Grimes' 44-point performance, he shot 18 of 24 from the floor, 6 of 9 from three. I mean, those are crazy efficient numbers. And then he followed that out with only 14-point performance the next game against Portland, but then the very next night in Minnesota, he drops 30 points on 12 of 18, 3 of 7 from three. Um, it. I think that the Sixers have a lot of really nice young pieces right now with Jared McCain, Kelly Oubre, Tyrese Maxey, obviously, Quentin Grimes. It'll be, even if Embiid doesn't come back healthy next year, and hopefully they get rid of Paul George in the offseason, it will be interesting to see how they build this roster moving forward. I think me personally, I'm out of the stage of being upset that this team isn't going to do anything this year. I've gotten past that, and now I'm at the point of kind of optimism for the future and curiosity to see where things go from here.
yeah, I agree. The best move is probably to find a way to shut down Paul George for the rest of the season. He's had like 5 different nagging injuries, so if you can like get that pinky to get him shut down for the season, if the Sixers move from the 6th spot in the lottery to the 4th spot, they move their chances to keeping their pick from 48% to 81%. So
Mm,
that's extremely crucial to move up 2 spots with
yeah.
2 teams that are trending in the right directions that are around them. I forget those 2 teams that
And
are like
well, let
right
me
around.
ask you this. Actually, I can pull this up real quick, but I'm also wondering not only what the odds of keeping their pick, but the odds of getting the number one pick. So I'm gonna pull that up right here on tankathon.com. Oh,
Yeah,
right
but
now
I
they're
think this
sitting at
season, I
seventh
think the
spot.
pivot for this season has to be securing that top 6 pick and not
Well, yeah,
allowing
no, they got to
it has
secure,
to
but
happen that way.
so
And we
right
also
now
talked about on the last
they're at
podcast.
7. If they move up to 4, they go from an 8.2% chance at the number 1 pick to a 12.5% chance.
So not too drastic, but definitely helps you out by a
Oh
nice
yeah,
up.
definitely helps you out. You get a lot more ping pong balls.
And another, the last topic that we got for the Sixers, there's a
And
rumor
then
that,
I'll do my meatball of the week.
yes, sir. There's a rumor that Bob Myers, former GM of the Golden State Warriors, who is working with the Washington Commanders right now, and Sixers owner Josh Harris on that. There's a rumor that the Sixers could be looking to get him in the front office to help things out over there. So, but real quickly, just to make sure that people are clear on the situation, Bob Myers isn't the actual guy that drafted Clay and Steph Curry. He took over for GM after he was like the director of no, what was he doing? He was like in their front office for like 11 months before he got promoted to GM. But Larry Riley was actually the guy that drafted Steph and Clay that got demoted to the director of scouting, but
That's
Myers was doing
insane.
scouting beforehand.
You
But
get
his
demoted for drafting Stephen Clay. That's crazy.
yeah, but Bob Myers' credit lies with the rebirth of the Warriors for the 2022 title. I mean, he obviously brought Kevin Durant in with that time period, but I feel like that. I mean, Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant. If you bring him onto any team, you're most likely going to win the championship or be close to it. So, but drafting guys like Draymond, Harrison Barnes, but
Bringing in Iggy.
he also had some massive, massive, massive draft whiffs. And James Wiseman, second
That was
overall.
a big one.
Moses Moody, just an average player at best.
Well, he
John
would have brought in Kuminga and
Kaminga's a good player.
Jordan
He still has
Poole,
like
who at the
untapped
time was
potential,
really good.
but yeah, so Bob Myers could be looking at coming to the Sixers organization. That isn't known whether he would just be joining their front office and not taking over Daryl Morey's spot, or if it's a plan to get rid of Morey and get Bob Myers in there. So I mean, I think it's time to clean house with Morey. There's people that defend
I
him. There's
agree.
people
I
that
agree.
saying that
We
make
need
the
a we
argument
need
like,
a
what
fresh
else do you think he could
start.
do this offseason with the Paul George situation? There was nowhere else to allocate your money and spend your money, but this just isn't working out. And he's always been like on the cusp of a championship with a generational player and just hasn't been able to get it done. And it's just history is just repeating itself again. So I think it's time for Daryl Morey to pack it up. And he's somebody
I
that
agree there.
doesn't even get anywhere near as much flack that he should be taking. So I think it's time to rally up the troops and get Daryl Morey out of office. Last NBA topic, we already talked about it. LeBron James is the best player in the NBA. And, you know, he was kind of fluctuating between a top 5 player for the past couple seasons. He just needed like a retooling, another breath of fresh air with Luka coming back and him to play in like a different role. But I don't know if you saw the numbers specifically, Dante. He's literally putting up, since he's turned 40, he's putting up the same numbers that of one of his MVP seasons with the Heat
I did see
a
that. Yeah.
decade before that. He's playing center now for them too. Like there's a chance that 40-year-old LeBron's gonna have to match up with Nikola Jokic in like the Western Conference Finals, like banging with them down low in the
Yeah.
five
No,
in the five. So
it, it's weird because as much as I hate to say it, LeBron is playing, better this year than he did the previous
and some
couple of
Sixers fans didn't even want to bring him to the roster when he was a free agent. And it was like somewhat of a possibility. It was like there was a very good chance. But he also did say before he went to LA that the Sixers were the second team that he was looking at. And he obviously had the close relationship with Ben Simmons before that, before they ended up having to cut ties with Ben Simmons. But yeah, LeBron's the best part. Craziest part about the Lakers right now, since moving on from AD, since February 1st, they had the number 1 defense in the league. Doesn't even make
Mm.
sense. You trade like the best defensive center in the league, and you just become the best defensive team with a guy that's apparently doesn't play any defense in Luka Doncic. So
Yeah, interesting. But anyway, it is now time for my meatball of the week. My meatball of the week is you, John Cena, you son of a bitch. You turned your back on the fans. You turned your back on America. You turned your back on Cody Rhodes. You sold your soul to The Rock, you goddamn son of a bitch, John Cena. You're my meatball of the week. God damn it.
Yeah, I don't care about wrestling in any form or shape. The only person I probably do care about is John Cena, so I'll ride with him whatever he does. I saw Travis Scott was like blowing out Cody
Actually,
Rhodes
you know
with
what?
eardrums.
Wait, no. Now that you say that, Travis Scott should actually be the meatball of the week for actually punching Cody Rhodes and rupturing an eardrum instead of faking his punch. So, no, Travis
I
Scott.
also
Actually,
feel like
yeah,
those
you're the real meatball of the week.
I think those stories that come out are also just like I feel like a lot of them are fabricated to like make the WWE look a certain way. Like I feel like that's just didn't happen at all.
I mean, did you see it? He fucking hit the
Bro,
shit
it's
out of
Travis
him.
Scott, dude. I love Travis Scott. He was like one of my favorite musicians, but like, bro, he weighs 130 pounds.
A solid punch is a solid punch, my
Stop.
man.
Brock Lesnar used to actually do it and was a UFC MMA heavyweight champion. Like, imagine how that felt.
Yeah. Oh, probably that's
Remember
pretty
when
damn
Floyd
good.
actually punched the Big Show?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was the first time I ever watched wrestling. But anyway, time to move on from John Cena, you son of a bitch. Um, I hate you. I hate you, Cena. Turned your back on all those dying children. How dare you? Um, but yeah, moving on from John Cena. Let's talk. What do you want to talk about next? Phillies or Eagles?
Yeah, let's load up some Phillies topics here.
Yeah,
So,
real quick, real
um,
quick. We got a few Eagles topics to talk about. So
yeah, we
let's
got a
move.
lot to talk about. We're just gonna mix in some Phillies talk real quickly. I mean, we had a long win to the Sixers just because they're dropping bombs on us. Like when like we're trying to focus on the Phillies and the Eagles, and then the Sixers just want to not become relevant, but they just want to drop like
Make
all these
headlines.
make headlines with all these different things going on. So that was probably the last time we'll talk in that long-winded time about the Sixers for quite some time. But Bryce Harper has been making a steady appearance in the 2-hole in spring, but spring
Mm-hmm.
hasn't really been going good for the Phillies. They were down what,
No.
12-0 today at one point. Jesus Luzardo getting
17-7
teed
was the
off,
final.
and Zach Wheeler got drilled yesterday, and they were down or they lost 12-3. So
You
not
know,
good.
but that's the thing. I feel like spring training never translates to the regular season, so I'm not worried about it. It's just kind
I
of
know,
funny
but like,
that.
what kind of situation can you find yourself in as Zach Wheeler to like ever be in a like Zach Wheeler's like? Let's make a comparison here real quickly. Real quickly. Don't overthink it though. Name an NBA player Zach Wheeler is like amongst pitchers. Like you can name a top 5 NBA player, but like amongst pitchers, like how you would put like Shohei's up there, obviously probably the best pitcher, and then Zach Wheeler's like 2 or 3. Like who would you think Zach Wheeler would be like NBA wise? And then give me a NFL player you would think he is wise too, and I would feel like it would have to be a quarterback and someone in that like top 3.
If I would compare Zach Wheeler to an NFL quarterback, I'm going Philip Rivers.
Is that a joke?
Philip Rivers is a Hall of Fame quarterback.
He's not though.
You don't think Philip Rivers is going to the Hall of Fame?
I mean, like he's like puts himself close to the conversation. I think he's more of a Hall of Famer than Eli Manning, but not really. I like Philip Rivers. It's just like he never could get over the hump, and he just like was a
Well, he
pick.
never had the talent around him to get over the hump. Well, okay, he had
The
LaDainian
guy that
Tomlinson.
played
What
with
did he have
Antonio
outside of that?
Gates,
Who was his
LaDainian
best wide receiver?
Tomlinson,
Stevie
the
Johnson?
guy that had the Chargers at one time in their backfield had LaDainian Tomlinson. Who was the dude that was on? Who was the dude that was on the starting running back for the Falcons for a couple years with the crazy name?
I don't know, but they didn't have a defense at that time.
They had Lorenzo Neal
Sure, the
as
offense
their
was loaded,
fullback
but they had no defense.
and Darren Sproles in the backfield. At
And they had
Michael
no
Turner,
defense.
they had
No
LaDainian
defense.
Thompson, Michael Turner, Darren Sproles. I mean, they had what's his name on defense? I'm drawing a blank. During that time period, Antonio Cromartie was on their defense. He has the crazy pick over Peyton Manning back in the day was like my favorite pitcher ever. The
All right, well,
one-handed.
anyway, we're getting sidetracked with the Phillip Rivers talk.
I mean, that's just I was like waiting to hear Joe Burrow's name, and I just hear Phillip Rivers get thrown out of there, just like
Well, I'm
completely.
trying to
Throws
think
me out
of
of the team.
a
I wanted you to name like Josh
non-swaggy
Allen, like
quarterback.
Josh
Joe
Allen.
Burrow is way too swaggy to be compared to Zach Wheeler. Who's a very bland guy who played. I guess Peyton Manning, very bland guy, did a great job playing quarterback, but he's not on a Peyton Manning level.
I don't know. I feel like that's also another conversation. Is like Zach Wheeler, like people were going through today, and they were talking about who they
I would
think.
say Andrew Luck. Yeah, I'll go Andrew Luck.
All right, I'll take that.
Maybe
Andrew
Andrew
Luck,
Luck
like,
pitchers.
yeah. All right, whatever. The reason why I said that was because like it's very seldom that players of that caliber that are that good at what they do have like a complete abysmal game like that. And it's just like when was the last time we even seen Zach Wheeler get teed off on? I remember
It
Aaron
happened a
Nola.
couple times last season, but that was it.
Yeah, I remember when Aaron Nola, like that one game that he had, I think it was last year
Well, Aaron Nola, I
versus
mean,
the
he
Red
is
Sox.
as up and
Was
down as
rough,
it gets.
but yeah, the spring has been rough. But Bryce Harper making the steady appearance in the 2 hole, so that's been a good thing. We're not going to put too much emphasis in it. Also, Gabriel Rincones turned 24 today. 3 homers on the spring training so far. I think he had
Yeah,
2 in
he's
one
having a
game.
good spring.
He's smacking the ball all over the place. He's also gigantic. He's like 6'3", 225. I think he tore his thumb up, like a ligament in his thumb last year, sliding into second base, either stealing or just base running. That's what their GM said. He's had some unfortunate injuries that have kind of held him back, but 24 years old, just turned it today, and he's been smacking the ball all over the place, corner outfielder, and he's supposedly an above average outfielder defensively. We obviously saw what the bat's capable of, and he's just above average apparently in every category of like he kind of catches you off guard with like deceptively being like a good base runner and a good defenseman. So, I mean, if that could add any depth to the prospect reigns, I'd be excited about that. So, also, Bryce Harper was getting interviewed on the radio today, and I thought this was a very interesting story that I haven't heard before. So, the day before Bryce Harper signed with the Phillies, he had a bag packed in his closet. He was sitting in his closet. He had a bag packed in there. It was a Phillies bag with all Phillies gear in there, and it literally had the Phillies P on there, he said. And his agent, Scott Boras, called and said that San Francisco was interested in on him. And he said, "Nah, I'm a Philly." And Scott Boras
Yeah,
goes,
I mean, this is a guy who was trying to get a contract extension, even though he's signed until he's 39. I mean, yeah, he also just got a tattoo of the Philly fanatic. Bryce Harper
yeah.
is never leaving the city.
Yeah, so and then Scott Boras asked him back. He said, "No, I'm a Philly." So that just showed his
Yeah, I mean,
commitment
that
there.
makes sense.
And it's funny, like the way that it all plays out. We're going to talk about the Saquon contract. That was something that I randomly just predicted last week. It just came up in topic, and we talked about it possibly happening. But it's just crazy how, if you look at the 3 major teams in Philadelphia, Bryce wanted that extension, and the Phillies kind of brushed it off last season. And then last season, obviously, ended up flaring out. Saquon gets it after this remarkable season that he just had, leading the Eagles to a Super Bowl victory. And then Joel gets his, and then you see the states. So just look at the 3 different states of the Phillies, the Eagles, and the Sixers, and they were all dealing with anointing and rewarding somebody from within, and just look at the different directions that each one of those avenues could take.
Yeah.
So, which is just absolutely crazy. And I think Bryce Harper is actually the 54th highest paid player in the MLB right now, which kind of makes sense
Well,
why
yeah,
he would
because
want a
I
new
mean, he
contract.
signed his deal quite a few years ago now, so the market has definitely gone up for MLB players. I
And
think
you
he's
know
only
what's
making
one
like
thing that could
25
help his
mil a
value?
year, which is like nothing now. What?
And you know it's something else that could help his value?
What's
There's
that?
also a report that's being thrown out there by Ken Rosenthal that is saying that Bryce Harper was willing to move from first base to the outfield if the Phillies were willing or were able to land a difference-making first baseman. So,
I think, but and you know, with that, I think, you know, even if you want to bring up Aiden Miller, let's say, and put Bohm at first and then move Harper back to the outfield. I mean, I think there's a lot of scenarios in which Harper can move back to the outfield, let alone just bringing in a star first baseman from outside the organization.
I kind of keep having this thing where like they could have made it work this year. I mean, realistically, I know Reese Hoskins, not only just like the part of like we couldn't really see where he would line up in the lineup because his defense was so bad, and we just don't want another bad like an unreliable first baseman. I think he's a better defensive player, even though he's not the best third baseman. I mean, we could have signed Alex Bregman, moved Alec Bohm to first, and then moved Bryce to the outfield. And
Yeah, I mean that could have happened as well.
that Alex Bregman signing, I know the AL is weak, but the Alex Bregman signing has the Red Sox within like the top 5 odds to win the entire American League, just based off of
I
that
don't
move
see that.
itself.
As much as I like the Red Sox, I don't see
Well, I mean, I
that.
don't really see any team. I mean, I liked what the Yankees did actually retooling and getting Cody Bellinger. I actually thought the Phillies should have been all over Cody Bellinger or Kyle Tucker. They tried to get Kyle Tucker, but there was never really any reported interest in Cody Bellinger, which I never understood. I don't know if they're not trying to stack a bunch of lefty bats like that in the lineup, or it just didn't make sense. But I thought they would have been more aggressive in that avenue. But Alec Bohm also showed a little bit of power. He had 2 home runs on Sunday. I was able to watch the
Yeah,
game on
I
Sunday.
mean
So
that's definitely good to see. I mean we've been waiting for Bohm to show
that
more
adds a
pop.
whole
We
nother
saw
element to the
glimpses of it last year, so this is good.
that adds a whole nother element to it, to the Phillies. If he can just like get to the range of like closer to 20 home runs a season, like even like sneak
If you
around
get it
25,
20 to 25, yeah, that really elevates the Phillies in my opinion.
just completely elevates them. It's almost like adding like a whole another player. Also,
Yeah.
another thing, Larry Boa was getting interviewed. I think it was either yesterday or the day before, and he was like talking about Trey Turner specifically. And Trey Turner also got interviewed today. He had a couple things to say, but Larry Boa was saying that Trey Turner could be looking at like a 50 to 60 stolen base season. And just getting him more on there. And there's different factors that played into him not being able to put that type of base running production out there. So I think they're going to do everything they possibly can to get Trey in that one hole, so that he can run the bases. And
Well, and
Larry
that's the
Boa
thing
also
with
said real quickly. Larry Boa also said that the target for Trey Turner, if he bats in the leadoff spot, should be to score 100 runs, and then everything will fall into place from there.
yeah, I mean that's the thing with and I'll say this and then we got to move on to the Eagles. But with Trey Turner in the leadoff spot, let's say Trey Turner kicks things off with a single, right? And then he steals second, okay? And then, you have a lefty up after that if they continue with this Bryce Harper batting second trend. So then, Bryce Harper grounding out, a lefty grounding out means a ground ball to the second baseman, which means if Trey Turner's at second base, that means he'll advance to third on that ground ball.
I know,
And
but
then you got
you also
third
have
with
to
one
be
out.
you also have to be prepared for Bryce is like one of the few players that can like reach anything with the bat. So like I mean, at very rare occasions he could tap on down the third base line just off of that, just like reaching for it. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah,
get what you're
but
saying though.
but
Just
but yeah,
most
my point
likely, I
is
get what
if
you're saying.
if they have Turner bat leadoff and Turner is serious about stealing 60 bases, then you're going to see a lot of games where Trace Turner starts off at second base because he got on base and then stole second. And then, in that case, or even a fly ball from Harper into right field, which is very common from Bryce Harper. That would also advance Turner over to third. So I mean, you're if he's serious about staying on this many bases and they bat him lead off throughout the year, you're going to see a lot of games where the Phillies start off the game with Trey Turner at third with one out or less. So I think that would be huge for
Yeah, I
the
think the lineup has to be set. 1 and 2 are already set. You just got to figure out like 3, 4, 5. And
yeah.
like personally, I would probably go 3. I would give Bohm the opportunity for 3, Schwarber 4, and then I might put Bryson Stott at 5, and
Mm.
then Castellanos
Nah, give
protect
me
him.
Costi at 5. Give me Costi at 5.
Yeah, I mean,
By the way, actually, sorry, one more thing before we move on to the Eagles. One guy who's having a great spring, is a guy I've been an advocate for, since last season. Johan Rojas. I think he's batting what 308 right now. He's been looking good in spring training. So that's also
Yeah,
encouraging.
but I feel like even when those stretches that he has, I mean, when he first came up with the Phillies, like he was batting like a high batting average and then just completely teared off in the playoffs. And it's just feel like it's just like a dry 300 though. Like when he goes through those stretches, like it's not like too much
Well, he
production.
hasn't really gone through much of a stretch since. So, I mean, look, if he can start hitting well again this year, that'd be great.
Listen, it's 162 games. There's always going to be a role for Johan Rojas. I just don't think he should be the starting center fielder, and you're not going to go past the trade deadline with aspirations of him being your starting center fielder. He could always be a defensive rotational piece, but I feel like from years past to this year, he's going to really have to work to get on that 26-man playoff roster if it comes down to that. Because
I think you gotta see if he can hit this year or not. But anyway, let's move on to the Eagles. Let's start off with the biggest piece of news for the Eagles. Because this is something I was very worried about. The Eagles have officially re-signed Zach Bond. They've given him a 3-year, $51 million contract. I'm so relieved. I was really worried about it because Howie Roseman has had a long history of not locking down star linebacker talent. And he finally does. So, we get more of Zach Bond and Nakobe Dean. And I'm thrilled, man. To me, this is a weight off the shoulders.
yeah, it was a necessity. I mean, I think everybody knew that Zach Bond was going to stay. There was just kind of, that was the top
I was a
priority.
little worried about it just because of
Every
Howie's track record with linebackers.
Yeah, but that was also something like we'll talk about the Howie podcast that he went on. There's a lot of information in that podcast that I want to talk about today because that just shows you all the mindset of Howie and how he sets up this roster and his team. And you'll see how this all comes full circle when I start telling that information. But yeah, I mean, Nakobe Dean, patella tendon injury, Oren Burks, free agent who stepped in for Nakobe Dean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., 5th-round pick, pretty slow. But has some talent, so he could maybe fill in. Ben Van Zumeren, the other linebacker on the roster, is playing fullback and was hurt for the rest of the season. So there's not too many options there besides getting Zach Bond onto the roster. The trend that I'm picking up with the Eagles is Saquon Barkley, original contract coming to Philadelphia, 3 years. A.J. Brown extension, 3 years. Devontae Smith extension, 3 years. C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back to the Eagles, 3 years. Zach Bond extension, 3 years. It's like that sweet spot that Howie knows how to get the cap manipulated to, and it's like the 3-year, getting a guy on the books for 3 years and then being able to move the money all over the place. So that's something that I thought was interesting, and there was definitely going to be a market out there. I was reading an ESPN article that was showing the different like tiers that guys had, that ESPN writers had listed the defensive free agents, and it was very interesting for defensive tackle, edge rusher, and linebacker. There was no tier 1 player of any sort, and by the writer. I'm not specifically sure who wrote this article, but it was definitely somebody that was decorated like a senior ESPN NFL writer. And in the tier 2, pretty much by themselves, they had Milton Williams as a defensive tackle. They had Zach Bond in the tier 2 by himself as a linebacker, only because he only has 1 year of production, but they said it was tier 1 production just based off of 1 year. And then Josh Sweat was in the tier 2 by himself. So 3 Eagles defensive free agents along atop the list of their positions tier wise. And this is over some of like the bigger names that are around in the sport that have made a name for themselves. So there was going to be a market out there for Zach Bond, but Howie was just never going to let him leave. So that just is what it
Yeah,
comes down.
and I'm very glad and relieved that that is the case. Now we've had some people depart. One guy who's definitely gone for good, no doubt about it. That is James Bradbury. I was a little upset to see we only saved $2 million by releasing him, but hey, a win's a win. And then another guy
Yeah,
who,
they're going to take on some dead cap with that as well. James Bradbury. I
yeah,
mean, just just a 3-year stretch of time. Like I don't even know who I could compare that to in like another NFL like history of 3-year stretch of time of being an all pro, Super Bowl, getting to the Super Bowl, and then he's not the reason they lost, but you're the guy that made the play that pretty much lost the Super Bowl, even though that's obviously we know that the entire defense just couldn't handle them in the second half. But that singular play, absolute fall off last year, and then moved to a different position and then gone on a contract that you were given after that Super Bowl. I mean, it was just a crazy stretch of time for James Bradberry. But I mean, the Eagles got the towel and they rinsed out everything they could possibly get out of the towel. And, it would have been a
And
lot.
listen, Bradbury gets to walk away with a ton of money in a Super Bowl ring.
You know how
So
much hate James
shout out to
Bradberry
James
would be
Bradbury.
receiving if Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell never emerged for the Eagles or ever got drafted by the Eagles, and they just had a revolving door at corner, and the last guy was James Bradberry, and he had that fall off. He would be an absolute like Tobias Harris to the city. People would hate him.
Yeah, I agree there. Instead, he's kind of looked at as a bit of a hero by some people, just from how well he played his role this past season, not
I
causing
think
any
the thing that I'll
drama
remember about
and
him
being a
is
mentor.
yeah, I like him in the mentor role. That's also a big thing of getting rid of him and Big Play Slay is Big Play Slay could come back. Like
Well,
they
that's
said.
what I was about to get into. Yeah, the other guy we released is obviously Slay, who a lot of people think
Last
he might come
last time,
back. He did last time we released him after the 2022 season.
and we
I would
also
love to
released.
see him come back on on a restructured 1 year deal.
Also, they cut Avonte Maddox, who was the starting nickel for how many years on end because of like injury.
He had been here since 2018. He was here a
And they
long
brought him
time.
back last summer as well after they cut him, and that was over like month stretch of time. Like the last time
Yeah.
Darius Slay was given permission to seek a trade, and that's when they had the situation where they had to pay James Bradberry, Slay, and or CJ Gardner Johnson. They picked Bradberry and Slay and CJ Gardner Johnson, and then ended up with all of them on the roster for this past Super Bowl. And Slay and CJ did their thing, and James Bradberry just wasn't able to play this year. So it was a pretty crazy situation. That was one of the whiffs that Howie had. And like I said, it was so crazy. The Eagles won the Super Bowl and their defense was number one in the league. And their two of their highest paid players in James Bradberry and Bryce Huff didn't even suit up in the Super Bowl. That just blows my mind. Just blows my mind that they were able to pull that off. So, but let's get into some of these Howie his little podcast tour. He went on the Todd McShay podcast. It's called the McShay Show podcast. And he started off a little crazy, just absolutely crazy. I didn't know how you didn't hear this, but he was asked about the feelings of the first Super Bowl and the second Super Bowl, and he compared it to sex. And he compared it to how you're just happy to your first time having sex. And the second time you're kind of actually looking to, enjoy yourself. And he kind of said that he called Joe Douglas after the Super Bowl 52 victory on like a Tuesday. And he's like asking Joe Douglas what he's doing. He's like, oh, what about the bender that we were supposed to be going on for months or whatever? He's like, we're 6 weeks behind every other team in the NFL right now. We got to get back to it. So that was his mindset after he won the first Super Bowl. And it just felt like he had to get back to work. And he just was kind of behind the eight ball a little bit. And, just how things have changed from even the first Super Bowl that they won to the second Super Bowl, and just the entire mindset. He also said that he used to see a successful season as getting a contract extended in any variety and winning the division. And now he sees it as Super Bowl or bust every single season. He says, like, if they're not winning a Super Bowl, then,
Yeah, and you know what? I mean, I can agree with that, from like the fan perspective of it is like, yeah, like before we won the Super Bowl, like going to an NFC championship game was like a great season to be remembered. Like the '08 season when we went to the NFC championship game but lost to Arizona. It was like you would look back on that season like, oh, 2008 was a great year. We went to the NFC championship game. And then, for a little bit, because of the missing the playoffs 3 straight years following this, but winning the division in 2013, like that season, at least to me, I looked at that very fondly of like the Nick Foles year, and we won the division.
especially when you're like crossing
We didn't
over.
even win a game, but we went to the playoffs, and then ever since the Eagles won
Real
the Super
quickly though,
Bowl.
because you just had that one comment, I just want to interject real quickly. But that's also different when you're like changing coaches too. Like when you had Andy Reid as like the absolute staple of your franchise for so long, and I mean the way that Howie talks about Andy and the way that Andy talks about Howie, I mean it seems like they're just best friends for life, and they'll always appreciate each other. That's crazy how the Eagles and the Chiefs are going through these battles right now with Andy giving Howie the start out. For his career. But yeah, it's like you're trying to win a division when you're transitioning from Chip Kelly. You're going from Andy Reid to Chip Kelly. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, I mean that's a good
that's the
point,
goal.
but I mean, like, but I kind of mean just as a fan, and it's like, at least for me at that age, like I didn't really like look too deep into that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, my goal is always to win the division. I always start there, but like when you can see a team where it's like you set your ceiling at winning a division, or you
Well,
set yourself as a national
the other thing of it too, because I wanted to finish my point here is like before the Eagles won the Super Bowl, like at least with me, you would always look at like winning the Super Bowl as almost like an unrealistically high expectation. I think I honestly personally think back to years and years ago when I was a kid, and they had John Runyon on TV at Chickies and Pete's. And he was taking questions from the crowd, and like some little kid was like, "Do you think the Eagles can win the Super Bowl this year?" And like John Runyon chuckled, and everyone else chuckled, like, "Ha ha ha, naive kid asking if they can win the Super Bowl." But ever since they won 52, like that is where my mindset has been, where it's like I want them to win the Super Bowl, and if they don't win at all, then you know what I mean. Like I'm not really like like it just doesn't feel like the season was a success if they don't win it all. It's felt that way to me ever since Super Bowl 52. The other thing, Super Bowl 52, that was the first Super Bowl where I did not give two single shits about the commercials. Watching Super Bowls growing up, it was always like, oh, the Super Bowl commercials. And then Super Bowl 52, I was like, I don't fucking care. Get me back to the game. I am nervous. I am locked in. And ever since then, I've never given a shit about the commercials ever again. I've never cared at any
I've
point.
never cared about the commercials. I was always there for the football, but yeah, I mean, Howie has done his thing. It seems like he wasn't. It's not like he wasn't putting the effort back in the day into it with the Eagles, and how like they had all those NFC Championship appearances, and then the Super Bowl that they lost to with the Patriots in 2004, 2005, and then just not being able to get back. They like over a couple seasons, and then having that fluke run to 2008. It just seems like he has learned so much from his early years that he's putting it to use and is actually, utilizing his resources in the exact same way. And Howie said that he went to law school to learn the cap. So he was given advice to go to law school to learn the cap, promised an
Well, I'm so
expanded
glad
role.
he did that then, because he's an absolute cat wizard, dude.
Yeah,
No one
he's an
else does
absolute
it like
wizard.
it.
Um, he was promised an expanded role with the Eagles. If you can find some guys for the Eagles, then you can, keep moving up in the organization, starting out like scouting wise, because he always wanted to be a scout, and that was always like what he wanted to do. But he wasn't really like a football necessary guy. He was going all over the place to send a bunch of letters out and everything, and nothing would stick. And then Andy told him that if he ever wanted to be a GM, that he needs to go on the road. And the reason why he kind of like brushed it off a little bit, but ended up that happening and saw it as something. It was like a very good piece of advice for him because it made him able to be more personable with the scouts that he that were reporting to him, that knowing that they were going through similar stuff or they had went through similar stuff, and he could understand that. So he also said one of the best things that ever happened to him was the public embarrassment of the Chip Kelly era, because he had to retool and had to get things back on board. I mean, he hired a guy that ended up taking his job, which is crazy to think about. But that obviously, he ended up getting his job back. And during that time period, when he wasn't the GM of the Eagles and was still with the organization, but didn't have that job anymore, um, he got advice from a European soccer GM telling him And Howie's like has all these like a pen and pad written down, like waiting to like write all these notes down and pick this guy's brain and everything. And he asks him, "What's the first thing I need to do to build like a really good team?" Like he asks him that piece of advice, and he tells him to start off. He says the European soccer GM says, hire people that are really good at their job, you love being around, and are good people. And then that was literally that. That was the
Hmm.
only thing that was written down. And the philosophy of the Eagles surrounding themselves around good people kind of just shows you how,
Big Dom. You know what I'm saying?
Big Dom, that's somebody
The
also another very
consigliere.
funny, like one of the
And you
funniest.
know what I think the real key to it all is? More Italians in the coaching staff. That's really what did it. You know what I'm saying?
Well, he said
Why
Big
do you
Dom.
think Vic Fangio was so much better than Sean Desai or Matt Patricia or Jonathan Gannon or even Jim Schwartz, throwing it back to Jim Schwartz, Italian? All right. Why do you think Sirianni could get it done in Philly, but Andy Reid couldn't get it done Italian? Okay. Why do you think Big Dom is the most famous head of security in the NFL? He's a Paisan. And now we got Kevin Petullo. I mean, look, it's all complete now. You know what
Well,
I'm
Kevin
saying?
Patullo might be the exact description of what we're talking about right now, of hiring a guy you love being around.
It's
He's a
because
good
he's a
person,
paisan. He's a
but he
paisan.
needs to answer. He needs to
The
answer the
English
question if
soccer
he's good at
coach,
his
he
job.
said, bringing good people. What he really meant to say is bringing good fellas.
Yeah, so that's what he said. That also shows why they're probably rewarding in-house guys like Zach Bond and Saquon Barkley for their contributions to the roster. He also said having the right players in the building saved the season around the bye week, and that the general message around the bye week is we're too good of a team to allow this to happen. And that's like the same sentiment that all the players were pretty much relaying the night before the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl Eve in their speeches. Like Saquon was like, they can't fuck with us. Like they can't fuck
Yeah.
with us as a team. So
I
they
mean,
knew this
it's
all along. This was
one of the most
something that,
talented teams in NFL history, honestly.
oh, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. Guaranteed. And they saw themselves as the best team in the entire league, and they said it at the bye week. They said it before the Super Bowl happened, and they just went out and they kind of like simplified things in a way. They didn't overthink it. So they simplified things, and it just allowed them to play free and get stuff done. So, and they also asked Todd McShay asked him why he's always drafting quarterbacks, and he said that no other team in the NFL has benefited from the backup quarterback position the way that the Philadelphia Eagles have in the past 25 years, which I completely agree with.
I agree with, but we've had some shitty backup quarterbacks.
But that was another branch to the topic, is like guys like he flipped Kevin Cobb, he flipped AJ Feely. There's different guys, there's different situations of what you can use them for. I mean,
Yeah.
there's guys like Clayton Thorson, that
Clayton
just
Thorson was a
nah,
huge.
no, no, no. Who's the one?
Well, here's the thing. I
No,
think
Carson Strong is the biggest what if in Eagles history. Remember, Carson Strong was supposed to be the next coming of whoever.
I forgot all about Carson Strong, but my theory with Clayton Thorson has always been this. I think the Eagles with that selection, they wanted to take Easton Stick out
Yeah, and then he
of
got drafted like a pick
North
before
Dakota
him.
State University, and then he was taken the pick prior by the Chargers, and the Eagles just said, "Screw it, we still need to take a quarterback here." So they just went with Clayton Thorson when really they wanted Easton Stick. That's always been my
I
theory.
mean, we're
Clayton
talking
Thorson, he was not even good in college, and he was not good on the Eagles at all.
we're talking about the fifth round here, so it doesn't matter anyway. Neither of
E
them are
But
in the
Easton
NFL anymore.
Stick had a much better college career than Clayton Thorson.
Yeah, well, he's also. I mean, Clayton Thorson's from TCU, and then what's his name? Easton Stick was from the best one AA program there is. So, I mean, at the time, they kind of fallen
No,
off a
no,
little bit since.
North Dakota State, they're not Division One. They're
I just see one
FCS.
double A.
No, they're FCS.
One double A, bro. That's what that is.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's getting late. For some reason I was thinking Division Two when you were saying that. I don't know why.
All right, let's go through these topics real quickly. We just had a
Yeah, let's
massive.
let's do a speed run.
Yeah, we
It's
got to
late
speed. Well,
now.
yeah, we got
Speed
to speed
run.
run now. Real
1 minute
quickly,
long speed
massive
run.
NFL news. Massive NFL news that just broke. Joey Bosa just got released by the Chargers. That might actually be
I did
something the
not
Eagles
see
could be
that.
interested
Wow.
in.
All right, that is
That just
massive.
happened seconds ago, so that could actually be a
Oh my
guy.
God! Wow, huge news. Another Paisan, potentially. Let's bring another Paisan in here. Put in the Paisan with the Paisan defensive coordinator. Come on.
And then Howie also talked about how he didn't think Q was going to be there when they picked in the first round, and Lori kept asking him, "Are you going to trade up? Are you going to trade up?" He's like, "Nah, like I think we're good. I think we're
Wait, to
good."
get who?
For Quinyon Mitchell. They didn't think he
Oh
was going to be
wow.
available in the first, but Lori kept asking him if he was going to trade up and asked him like twice. And Howie said that he thought that he was good and everything worked out. He also said that
Thank
there's a
God
little
it
bit of
did.
luck. There's a little bit of luck involved with that too. Um, he also was asked why he's always drafting defense high and having an offense that can score in when you have an offense that can score in bunches, you're going to play from ahead. So you have to close out games how? And that's with the front end and the back end of the defense. So that was his response to that. And they were going through it. And I didn't even realize it's like, I think they've drafted top five most amount of defensive players in the first round of like the 20 since 2000 of any team in the entire
I
NFL.
mean,
It's
that
been
would
a
make
lot.
sense.
It's been a lot. So they've been putting a lot of resources into the defense.
Who was our last first round pick on offense? Andre Dillard? Oh no, Smitty was after
Devontae.
him. But I think Smitty was the last one.
Yeah, Devontae.
Yeah.
Um, and you brought up Big Dom. They asked him for the draft parties who handles the food spread, and obviously Big Dom's name got mentioned. But real funny stuff. Howie was saying that a huge part of his relationship with Andy Reid is based off of food and how much they both love food and talk to each other constantly about food all day
I
long.
mean, there's nothing surprising about a story
I mean, Howie
revolving around
Roseman's
Andy Reid and
150
food.
pounds as well, too.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really funny. But yeah, that was pretty much summed up what Howie was talking about on the podcast. That was over like 20 minutes of time, but I mean, he's so detailed when he talks that it's, we go down the thing. But a couple last topics we'll speed run through real quickly. Jalen Hurts doppelganger. You saw the NFL Combine. Did you see his doppelganger out there?
Yeah. I saw that. Yeah, he's got a
Virginia
few
defensive back.
doppelgangers. There's a couple he's got on TikTok.
Yeah. He's got that one dude that does content. What's that dude's name? You know who I'm talking about? He's like, he does podcasts.
The UPS driver.
No, there's somebody that has like a pretty poppin' podcast that like interviews people.
Okay, yeah. So he's got that guy. He's got the UPS driver on TikTok. He's got this guy in the combine and 1990 Shamik Moore.
So which one do you think looks the closest?
The UPS guy on TikTok. If
The
you don't know
UPS
who I'm
guy looks
talking about,
close.
look it up. He looks exactly like Jalen
I know,
Hurts.
but the Virginia defensive back, Jonas
No, I think the UPS
Banker.
driver looks more like
Nah,
him.
but he's the closest. He's definitely the second closest to the UPS driver, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, we're less than a week away from free agency. Legal tampering begins at 12 p.m. March 10th.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, 7 Pro Bowlers were signed from free agency last season. So
Wow.
maybe we'll see if that upticks in number this season.
I
There's some guys that
saw,
hit the
I
market.
did see a post online where somebody ranked the top remaining free agents or the top free agents. Um, they had Milton Williams listed at 1, which I thought was interesting. The reason I say remaining free agents is because there's less now because guys have signed new deals. But yeah, they had Milton Williams listed at 1. I don't agree with it, but I thought that was interesting to see. And then one other final thing, Joe Tooney has been released, which I think is hysterical.
Not released, he
Um,
got traded.
oh yeah, he got traded, but it was for like a 6th-round pick. He basically got released. Um, yeah, I mean, Joe Tooney, a great offensive lineman, gets absolutely worked by the Eagles D line in the Super Bowl and then gets traded for a 6th-round pick. I mean, that is
Yeah,
the
and they did him
effectiveness.
they just completely did him so absolutely dirty. I mean, he's playing guard at an all-pro level, and they're like, "Hey, you want to go against the best defensive line in the league and play left tackle for us during the playoff run and then have to go against that defensive line in the Super Bowl? Let's run it." And yeah, he got done crazy dirty. That was the second lineman that the Bears traded for within 24 hours. The second guard the Bears traded for within 24 hours. So are they trying to
Yeah, the
protect?
Bears are making moves, man. The Bears, look out for the Bears next year. Look
Are
at
they
they
are
might
they trying to
go. They
protect?
might go 9-8. They might go 9-8 next year.
Are they trying to protect Caleb Williams? Or are they going to like sneakily draft a running back at the top of the draft out of nowhere, Ashton Genty or Marion
I mean,
Hampton?
maybe it's both. Looking to protect Caleb Williams, looking to get a running back there, maybe looking to bring in Ashton Genty. That would be crazy to see. They beef up that O line, bring in Ashton Genty, let Caleb Williams come out. After his rookie year. Usually, quarterbacks take a huge leap from their rookie year to their second year. I mean, look at Bryce Young in his rookie year compared to this past season. And there's a million other examples, but yeah, I think depending on what the Bears do in the draft, and in free agency, I mean, possibly look out for the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the prototype they have on the roster. They got some good young talent. They spent a lot of money in the offseason too. They spent that when I saw the Zach Bond contract, he's making like 1 million less per year than Tremaine Edmonds, who moved from Buffalo to the Bears that offseason. And that same offseason when they paid Edmonds, they also paid TJ Edwards. So they spent like 25 plus $million on the off-ball interior linebacker position in Chicago in one offseason. So that just shows they've always had good linebackers on their team too. So that just shows kind of their profile of what they like to do. Washington, they got Deebo Samuel. Washington, I will say this. This is what I'll say about the Deebo Samuel. Is Deebo Samuel a good player? Yes. Is he a great player? No. Is he a very good player? Yes. Does he make Washington better? Yes. Is he better than what they had on their roster? Yes. Is he a great receiver? No. Is he a really good receiver? No. Is he a good receiver? Yes. Is he a great weapon? Yes. So that's how I feel
Yeah,
about
I
this.
agree with all that, and they only got him for like a fifth round pick.
Yeah, I would have made that trade. That's
As somebody who would love for a reason to hate on the Commanders, I thought this was a great trade for them.
that's a really funny way to put it. And the funniest part about it was he not wearing an AJ Brown Eagles jersey at the Super Bowl less than 3 weeks ago, and now he's gonna have to play for the Washington
I did
Commanders.
see in that photo somebody said he's built like Brian Griffin, which I thought was pretty funny.
Also, a couple more topics and we'll get out of here. So the Eagles pivoted. So they
1
made.
minute or less.
I mean, I got so much on here. So real quickly, this was a topic that was kind of a topic before the Zach Bond extension, and it was like around the top 4 free agents. If they weren't able to land Zach Bond and like a guy like Nick Bolton was out there, 24, 25 years old, played on how many championship teams with the Chiefs by now, do you think they would have pivoted, or they still can pivot to like an edge rusher or a defensive tackle in free agency?
I think if they weren't going to re-sign Zach Bond, they weren't going to do anything at the linebacker position. I think when you have great linebacker depth with Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
That's not the case at all. I would not say that's the case at all. That's not great depth
I
at
would
all.
say it is
A
the
fifth
case. I
round
would
rookie
say
that runs like a 4.8.
I listen, if you're not going to keep Zach Bond, then because you don't want to spend the money, then you might as well rock with Nakobe Dean and Trotter Jr. or Nakobe Dean and Oren Burks. Maybe I'm assuming Oren Burks was on a 1-year deal, but maybe bring him back at
Yeah,
a cheaper deal rather than spend money on a different linebacker. That would make absolutely no sense.
So, I mean, they're gonna have to bring free agents and just like veterans and just like different types of people into the
Yeah, I
locker
know,
room.
but you're talking about spending money on a legit linebacker. If you're going to do that, just pay Zach Bond, which they did.
Well, I'm saying like if there was like a scenario where like they wanted Josh Sweat back and they couldn't have him, or the Zach Bond went to a random team and he was just out of the price range, and then they could get another player at that position for less money, do you think they would still be willing to like allocate those resources to that, or do you think they would just like kind of eat their money and see what they can do, or maybe like visit the trade market? Because that could be a scenario. I'm looking at a guy that I'm looking at. I'm going to make a tweet about is like, You can pivot to a 25-year-old former second overall pick in the draft, Chase Young, this offseason for like $15 million. Played the same amount of defense, same percentage of defensive snaps as Josh Sweat this last year. They both had 63%. And Chase Young put up some pretty good stats. I mean, he's a guy that
Oh
got
yeah, I
traded
mean, I would love to bring in
second
Chase Young.
overall. You would have to pay $15 million probably per year, but you could do like maybe a 2-year deal for $30 million, and you have a good edge rusher in the rotation that gives you leniency that you could either find a way to re-sign him if he's really productive and see what he can do in this lineup, or you just have him for the years that before those big kind contracts of like Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, Jalen Carter, and Nolan Smith all hit. So that's just one options that you could look out there. Lane Johnson always gets restructured. So there's rumors that restructure for Lane Johnson or contract extension for Lane Johnson could happen. That's something that always happens for the Eagles to free up some money. So that could be playing. Another big topic, Coop. Does he move outside with Slay gone if he's actually gone for good, or does he stay inside? I always thought about.
I think they'll hand the keys to either Rodgers or Keeley Ringo.
Well, they'd have to sign Rodgers back to a contract. He's a free agent, and Rodgers was ahead of Ringo last year. I'm a huge Ringo fan, as I've talked about on the podcast a lot before. There was a lot of talks about Coop like playing outside in the base formation and going back to nickel and dime packages and nickel packages when they have more defensive backs on the field. So that's one option that they could do. And
I think that would be the best option. It's when you come out 3-4, right? Have Quinyon and Coop out there, and then when you go the nickel package, put Coop back in the nickel and put Keeley Ringo outside. I think that's the best option. The other thing that somebody pointed out about Keeley Ringo, which I didn't even believe this when I heard it, he's only 22 years old. So he's gotten, a few years of learning as a backup. He's still very young. The talent's there. He has the team chemistry as a Georgia Bulldog, with those other Bulldogs on the defense. I say just let it rock with Keeley Ringo.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we talked about on the last podcast. He's like a top 10 recruit coming out of high school too. So he's been that dude.
Let's go with Keeley Ringo. Is that the final topic?
Yeah, should be. And
all right, cool. It is late.
One last thing, Bryce Huff, is he the next cap casualty? Do you think that's a thing, or do you think they actually try and, because they actually said that Bryce Huff, the story isn't out. What Howie Roseman referred to Bryce Huff as? The story isn't written about Bryce Huff yet, but I mean, come on now. Yeah, like if you can get rid of that contract,
I would just get rid of him. I accidentally muted myself again. I think maybe you take it into training camp, see if he has anything to offer, and if not, you just cut him. I think it's one of those situations, maybe.
I'll take give me I think asking for fifth's even crazy, like a 6th or a 7th round pick.
Just maybe you can get a 7th round pick out of it. Maybe get like a long snapper for him.
I think Rick Lovato is up for a contract. Are you paying Rick Lovato again? I mean, he's one of the 4 Eagles.
You know what? That's a better reason than any to trade Bryce Huff for a long snapper.
One of the 4 Eagles all time that has 2 Super Bowl victories.
What's that?
It's so funny because we went from a long snapper that was the most popular long snapper in the entire league to a guy that never gets talked about, and he's like one of the 4 players in franchise history that has won 2 Super Bowls.
I know, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, shout out Rick Lovato, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but that'll wrap it up for episode, 88 of the Paisan Sports podcast. So we're closing in on 100 soon. So it's going to be a crazy time period. Do you have any predictions for next week? How we kind of predicted a couple things last week going into this podcast, but what would be your
I predict for next week, Quentin Grimes starts to make a bit of a bigger name for himself. I predict that I don't have any predictions for the Phillies, really. It's spring training. Anything can happen. And as far as the Eagles go, we would air on the 12th. So a lot of interesting things could happen from now till the next podcast. So I predict I don't know. I got nothing.
Give me one random player that is not in the Eagles organization right now that will be in a week.
Screw it. Chase Young.
I want Chase Young so bad. He's actually my top priority at free agency. I'm like so hype about the idea of that.
Chase Young.
You put Chase Young in this rotation. I mean, we could have had him for a third round pick a couple years ago on his original deal, but I mean, he's actually playing well. He's still young, still 25. You tap that potential. I mean, you get him at a discount. You get him for like 5 to like 7 to 8 million less than you would pay for Milton Williams, and you're cooking again. You're absolutely cooking again. So I'd be very happy about that. But thank you guys for tuning in. Episode 88. My prediction is Paul George will be shut down for the rest of the season by the next time we do the podcast. That's my next prediction. I think that's one of the safest predictions. That's probably like a plus. That's probably a pick 'em line minus 110 that happens. So I'll hold my hat to that. But thank you guys for tuning in to episode 88 of the Paisan Sports podcast. We'll have NFL free agency news next week for you. An update on the Phillies going into the regular season. We're 3 weeks out from opening day, so it couldn't come soon enough. This weather doesn't make me feel like how horrible it was outside in South Jersey today. Doesn't make me feel like it's baseball season, but hey, you know what it is, and we'll see what happens with the Sixers next week. But thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you then.